it right now. So again, welcome to today's session. I'm going to be taking you through the basics of using Adobe InDesign, which is part of our Adobe Creative Cloud suite. So if you've never used InDesign before, or you're kind of a beginner and wanted some pointers, that's what we're here for today. So what is InDesign? It's basically a layout tool that's part of Creative Cloud. So with InDesign, you can do things like flyers. It says like the ones at your seat. Unfortunately, we usually do this in person, so I don't have a flyer to show you today, but I will send you some after the session since I have your emails on file. You can do really professional looking brochures, publications. You can do interactive online documents now in InDesign, meaning you can upload them to the cloud, have hyperlinks and things like that. And you can also do academic posters, which is what we're gonna do today, actually. So all of the design things that I'm gonna be showing you for an academic poster, you can easily translate that to any other document that you're trying to design with a little bit of a professional flair. So how do you get InDesign? So it's pretty easy. So if you want a Weill Cornell version of InDesign, you would basically go to the My Help Desk website, myhelpdesk.weill.cornell.edu. And what you do is you search in the request forms or just in the search bar when you first get to that website. And you just type in Adobe Creative Cloud request form, and it pops up, and you just fill out that request form. Just make sure that you're indicating whether you are a student or faculty or staff, so that it gets routed to the right people. And you're going to be asked to provide a business justification, basically a reason that you need not just InDesign, but Adobe Creative Cloud, because it's going to come with everything. It's going to come with Photoshop, it's going to come with Dreamweaver, it's going to come with Premiere Pro, a bunch of stuff. So, you just have to provide some type of business justification for why you need it. You might need it for research of some type, but just be as specific as possible so that when our staff gets that request and reviews it, they can, see that you're from Weill Cornell, the reasons you need it, and they can provide a license if needed or follow up with you to ask any questions. All right. We also have personal licenses available at a heavy discount. Creative Cloud is not cheap. It's a monthly fee essentially to use the cloud version. And you can actually not only get Creative Cloud, but a bunch of other software for your personal computer at home. It does not have to be tagged at this website, weillcornell.onthehub.com. It's really great. I highly recommend you check it out. All you have to do is register with your Weill Cornell Medicine email address. That's really important so that they know you're part of the institution. And then once you register your email address, you have access to a ton of software. Some of it is free, and some of it is very, very heavily discounted. So I highly recommend, if you want Creative Cloud on your personal device or any other type of, statistical software, even like Microsoft Office, I think is free for your personal computer, please check out On the Hub. It's really great. And I know that the library computers do have the Adobe Creative Cloud suite on them. I'm not sure. I know the library's open. I'm not sure about the computers. I can find out for everybody, but if you do need to use it, they're on there. So let's move on. I get this question a lot. So why should I use InDesign as opposed to, and then like insert a bevy of other tools like Word or PowerPoint. And I'm not saying you cannot use those tools, but there are definite benefits to using InDesign in lieu of those. So for like Word and PowerPoint, which I understand is a lot easier to use, and there's a bigger learning curve in the design, but there's a lot of benefits in InDesign, like if you're trying to use specific colors, and I'm talking stuff like if you're trying to get that Weill Cornell red for like a brochure you're using, or that orange or that yellow, you're not necessarily going to get it using Word or PowerPoint. You can't really match it as well as when you're using InDesign. What you see is what you get. The biggest reason I use InDesign, especially for a very professional document that I'm having printed, that's going out to a ton of people, like a brochure or our annual report, is so when you're in Word and you're creating this beautiful document, like a newsletter or something, and you've got all your text on the screen, and then you try to input like a photo, for example, and you try to put that photo in, and all your text breaks and like flies all over the page. And so that little comment about assuming fetal position, that is what it feels like to me when I work so hard on a document in Word, and then I try to do one little thing to make it look nicer, like put this nice little text box with or nice little photo with the text flowing around it, and it just doesn't work sometimes. Word is very inflexible, but in InDesign, you can make it look exactly how you want it to look. You don't have to worry about formatting breaks. You can kind of just creatively put things wherever you need to. As far as PowerPoint goes, I know a lot of people use PowerPoint for things like academic posters, and I realize that it's a lot easier for people to use PowerPoint. But the problem is when you try to print those posters from PowerPoint, it does not print well at all. It's not very sharp. A lot of the text can look blurred. It's just not ideal, especially if you're having something professionally printed. InDesign is great for that clean, high-res look. Everything looks very crisp and nice. And in PowerPoint, you just don't get that because it's used for, a screen, essentially. And what's used for screen is not great if you're going to print it. And then what's also great about InDesign is that it works well with all the other Creative Cloud services or applications. So if you've designed something in Photoshop, if you've created diagrams, like scientific diagrams in Illustrator, you can easily import those in InDesign when you're ready to lay out your document. And you can even edit in those applications simultaneously. And I'm going to show you how that works, but it's very cool. I also get a lot of questions about using Illustrator versus InDesign. So they're both great, okay? Illustrator is more for just drawing vector images. Vector meaning you can expand and contract these images, and you don't have to worry about losing that resolution when you make things much bigger and have it come out blurry. InDesign's a lot better for just creating layouts in general. There's more control over the type and text. You can create something called master pages where if you've got like page numbers or like templates that you want to use to have a consistent look across multiple pages, like a booklet of some kind, you can do that in InDesign, but not in Illustrator. And then also when you convert documents to PDF in InDesign, they tend to be a lot smaller, so it makes it easier to like send to people to review or to publish or to get printed. So, InDesign does have its benefits when it comes to layouts, but, you can use both of these tools together. So just an example of what you could do in Word versus InDesign. So on the top, you'll see that there was this brochure that we used to have in ITS. It was made in Word. It's not bad. I mean, it's got all the information you need. I feel like it leaves a bit to be desired. So we redesigned it at some point. And if you look at the bottom row, that's how we redesigned it in InDesign. So you see that it's like a lot cleaner, a lot more professional. We've got all of the Cornell branding and colors that were much harder to do in the Word document. So this is just kind of a taste of what you can do. So without further ado, I'm going to run and do this demo now. I'm going to make an academic poster with you guys. And full disclosure, I am not a scientist. This research has not been peer reviewed. And if I give you a little sample of what this is going to be about. So we used to have a colleague named Jason who used to do a Photoshop class about how to turn a plate of chicken into an explosion. And you can see a little bit of how he did that in this GIF. So I'm actually going to be taking his quote unquote a research and turning it into an academic poster. Before I do that, I saw a few comments. So I just want to make sure that I can answer them.
Oh yeah, we've got one. Actually, Barbara asked a question just as you were explaining why you would go with Illustrator versus InDesign.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Deanna just asked one that actually I was typing an answer to. Is InDesign similar to MS Publisher?
So yes and no. Actually, I don't think that Publisher exists or is supported anymore
Yeah,
in the Microsoft Office suite.
I don't
So
know either.
so if you have Publisher, it might be a really old version. So if you're using it, then they do work very similarly, where you can kind of create a space on the page and then put in text or an image and then lay it out. I feel like InDesign still looks nicer than anything you could create in Publisher, especially now that Publisher is not supported anymore. So if you create a document and then have issues with it, you're not going to be able to, you might not be able to fix what the problem is. So I would just say, you know, if you're comfortable using Publish, you can definitely make things in it, especially if you still have the tool. But definitely give InDesign a try. I mean, I understand there's a bigger learning curve, but I think the payoff is much greater at the end of the day when you look at your final product. So it's a definitely a good question. Was there another one, Bridget? I just saw a ping.
Whoops, I was muted. No,
Oh, that's
Janet
okay.
said me too.
Oh, okay, perfect. So I am going to switch over to InDesign. If you guys will just bear with me 1 second. All right. And let me go into InDesign. So this is a document I have set up to go through, you know, later in the session. But essentially, once you have Creative Cloud, you're going to have this little icon. I'm on a Mac, so it's at the top of my screen. It's a little cloud. And you'll have all of your, you know, applications that you can download. You don't have to download all of them, but definitely the ones that I use the most, especially for, you know, creating publications. I use InDesign, I use Illustrator, and I use Photoshop a lot. But today we're going to be working on InDesign. So when you're ready to use it, you just hit open, and then it opens into this. So there's a lot going on, but we're going to go through it one by one. All right. So the first thing that you want to do is just open a new file. And the way you do that is File and New. We're going to create a new document today. All right. So you're going to get this pop-up where you're going to decide the size of your document and, you know, what you're going to name it and a bunch of other things. But I will say, before you even start your document, okay, if you plan to have something professionally printed, so I'm creating a fake academic poster, but if I was going to have it professionally printed, the first thing I would do is call the printer or contact the printer that I'm planning on using and saying, hey, what poster sizes do you normally print? You know, a lot of times people have like images or color blocks that move to the edge of a document. That's called a bleed. So if I was going to do something like that, I'd have to ask the printer, like, how far does it have to extend off the page? Like, what are the measurements? So basically make sure that any important measurements that you need, you get from that printer before you just start creating it. Okay. It makes the process a lot easier because then when you send it to the printer, they're going to know exactly, you know, what they're getting, as opposed to you send a file to a printer and they're like, we can't do anything with this. And that's never a good situation. So just word of advice from me, if you're going to have something professionally printed, please talk to the printer ahead of time to get very important measurements from them. All right. So I've got this, you know, pop-up that is just asking me for some presets. So I'm going to call this academic poster. I'm just naming my file here. And you can choose your measurements. So it's got my measurements from the last time I did this, and that's exactly what I want today, which is 48 inches by 36 inches. You can make this portrait or horizontal. And I'm only using one page today because it's a poster, but if you were doing a booklet, you could do as many pages as you think it was going to be. You could do things like columns. So if you're doing like kind of like a magazine looking thing, you can add like 3 columns maybe for text. And then you've got your margins. I've got a 1/2 inch margin on all sides. I'm going to leave that today just so you guys see what that looks like when I finally open my document. And then bleed and slug. Again, these are things that have to do more with professional printing. If you hover over these, it says exactly what they are. So again, a bleed, like I mentioned before, is when something extends to the edge of a page, and usually printers need a little more content going off the page so that they can cut into the page, and it gives it that nice clean look of going past it. And then slug is just information that's at the on your documents that when you print them professionally. But in this case, I'm not going to do that because you know, it overcomplicates things for the sake of the demo. But one thing too is that you can change the unit of measurement for your document. So honestly, most of the time, you're going to probably be working with inches. However, if you're going to design something for the web, you may want to switch over to pixels. I have hardly ever used any of the other measurements in here, but just so you know, they are there in case there are situations where somebody may ask you to do something in centimeters. You know, it could happen. But for the most part, you're probably going to stick with inches in this case. So when you are done with setting up the width and the height and things like that, you're just gonna hit create. Okay, and then your document appears. So I kept that 1/2 inch margin just so you guys could see this. This pink line, this pink purplish line going all around the document is the margin. So if I wanted to make sure nothing went past it, I would just adhere to that guideline. It will not show up when you actually print the document or save it to a PDF electronically. It's just a guide for you as you're designing your document. And we have a lot of stuff going on here. We've got this toolbar here on the left, which is what we're going to be using a lot today. We've got kind of a menu at the top and a menu on the right. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I can't get through all of it in 45 minutes, but I can take you through probably the most commonly used tools that you're going to use, especially as a beginner. And you know, I'm hoping that's going to give you the confidence to try out InDesign. So I've got this big academic poster. I want it to look nice, professional. It's going to be about chicken. Hopefully it's interesting. The first thing I want to do is I've got this big white poster. I kind of don't want it to be just this plain big white poster. I'd like a background color. So I am going to use something called the rectangle tool. And really, when you're working in InDesign, you're going to just use the rectangle tool for almost everything. It's going to be the most useful tool that you could use. It is your friend. The rectangle tool is over on the left. So I'm over here. It's this rectangle here with an X in it, rectangle frame tool. And I'm going to click on it. All right, so my cursor changes a little bit, but basically what the rectangle tool does is you create a box and then you put stuff in the box. And by stuff, I mean it can be text, it can be a color, and it can be an image. So it can be a lot of different things, but that's basically how you're going to create a layout, just by creating boxes and putting stuff in it. That's the simplest way to describe InDesign. All right, so I've got my rectangle tool selected, and I just want a big background color across the entire canvas. So I'm just clicking and stretching. All right, and I just got a rectangle frame tool with a big X in it. And now I can put anything I want in it. So what do I want to put in it? A color. So when you're doing stuff in InDesign, there's a lot of different ways you could do the same thing, which is great because, you know, you can always find it somewhere. Color is usually in these blocks right here. And they also appear here at the top, all right? And you can also, I'm just gonna move this down so I can see it a little easier. So if I hover over it, it tells you what a lot of the content is up here, which helps. But fill is what is used to basically fill a box with color, all right? Right now there's no color, hence the little slash going through it. So I'm gonna double click it. All right, and then I can pick any color I want. I can pick it here if I want to, or I can, if I know the CMYK, which is like the color code for printing, or the RGB, which is the color code for web stuff, I can add it. But I actually know the color I'm going to use. So I'm just gonna type it in real quick, just bear with me. All right, and I've got my color here. It's like a light blue. I'm gonna hit okay, and it fills the entire screen. So that's all you have to do to add a color. You just double click here where it says fill, or even here, all right? And then just pick a color. It can be anything you want, all right? I'm gonna be adding a lot of stuff on top of this layer here. And I kind of don't wanna accidentally move it around as I'm moving other things on top of it. It's easy to do that. You move things around with this black arrow. And when I put other things on top of it in layers, kind of similar to Photoshop if you're familiar with it, I run the risk of accidentally, you know, moving everything else on the screen, which is never fun. So you can actually lock certain things on the screen. The way you do that is you're going to right click with the object selected. So I've got the background selected, and I've got an option here that says lock. I'm gonna do that. So now when I try to tug at this object, I can't move it, which is great. That's what I want. I don't want the background to move when I'm putting stuff on top of it. To unlock something, there's a few ways that you could do it. Sometimes it's a little hard to see, but you can't see it right now, but sometimes there's a little lock in the corner, and you can double click it and unlock it. If for some reason you can't find that, there's other ways that you can unlock it. One is to go into Object and unlock everything on the spread. The other way is if you've got your layers menu over here. I've got my rectangle. That's the only thing on the canvas right now. And you'll see a little lock next to it. So if I click it, it just unlocks this and I can move it again. All right. So there's a few ways again to do the same thing in InDesign. So it's pretty helpful. I'm going to lock it one more time. All right. And then I want to create a header and then all these different kind of areas on my canvas where it talks about, you know, my methodology, my conclusions, you know, things like that. So let's start with the header first. Again, rectangle tool right here on the left. I'm going to create another rectangle. It's going to be on top of this one. And I am going to, again, click that fill and then put another color in it. This one's going to be a little darker so that you guys can see it better because it is the headline. And then it is 6. There we go. All right, so there it is. Okay, and with my black arrow, I can position it wherever I want to. One cool thing about InDesign is that when you move things across the page, there we go. So that little pink line that went straight down the center, InDesign is trying to tell me this is the center of the document. So if you want to drop it there, it's going to be centered. All right, and it happens whenever I move it around. So I can actually put it dead center in the document. But it's a nice little automatic guide tool that just kind of helps you center things and make sure things are evenly spaced out. You'll just see random guides that pop up to just help you place things on your canvas. So it's kind of a nice little feature. All right, so I've got my big headline ready to go, my block, and then I want to add text in here. So you can use the rectangle tool if you want to place text, or you can also use something called the type tool, which is this T icon in the same toolbar. So I'm going to click that T. Again, make another box. We're just making boxes. That's all InDesign is, right? And it's very, very tiny, but there is a cursor right there. I'm going to type the headline and then make it larger so that you can see it. 1 second. Okay, so this is super tiny, right? You'll notice that every time I select something in this toolbar on the left, it changes the menu at the top. So because I have text selected, the menu at the top kind of turns into something that's similar to Word. I can change the font, I can change, you know, the size of the font and a few other things, justification and things like that. So with my text selected, I'm going to change a few things. First, I'm going to change the size of it so we can actually see it. All right. So from Chick-fil-A to Michael Bay, that's what I'm calling my very scientific research. Okay, I can change the font. So if I click here, I'll get a ton of previews to see what the font will look like if I change it to any of these options. But you can also just type it in if you know what you want to use. So I know I want to use Helvetica Bold. I'm going to select that, and it makes it a nice bold color for me. Again, I can also change the color of font. If I go back to where the fill normally was, you'll see that there's a T in it now. It's indicating that I can change the color of the actual font and not like a color block. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll make it a little lighter so that you guys can see it better on that dark background. There we go. All right. And then I can do some justification if I want. Again, just like in Word, I want this to be centered. Again, I can hover over any of these just to see what they are, but I am going to center it. I don't like that it's so close to kind of the top of the text box. So one cool thing you could do is if you've got a text box, you can right click it, and there is something called text frame options. And this lets you kind of even further customize text in a text box. But one thing I like to do is kind of tweak the vertical justification. So right now, all that text is aligned to the top of the box is what it's telling me. And I would like it in the center. So boom, it goes right to the center of that text box, and it looks a little nicer. All right, now we want to play with something else that has to do with color. It's called stroke. So you'll notice that I have been using the fill to kind of change the color of all the boxes I'm creating. There's something called stroke, which is changing the color of the outlines in a box, okay? So let me just kind of show you the difference. So I kind of want to have like this cool green line that goes around my headline. So I've selected that box, and I'm going to change the stroke color. Again, I'm just clicking like I did with the color picker with the fill, and I'm going to add a kind of very bold green so that you guys can see it. I'm not sure I would pick these colors in real life. It's more so that there's a lot of contrast, so it's easily visible on screen. All right. Don't judge me too harshly. So I've picked the green. It's very hard to see. And that's because the stroke is very thin right now. If I hover over here, you'll see something called 1 point. And that's basically the thickness of the line, the outline around my box. I can always make this much larger. So right now I'm increasing it. And you can see now on the page, that green line is getting very large and far more visible, all right? So if I unclick it, you can now see that I've got this green box around it. All right, I'm gonna create one more box just to kind of show how layering works in InDesign. I wanna create a box underneath the headline that is gonna have information about me and my institution. So I'm gonna create a big box here. And I'm gonna, again, fill it with a color. And that color is going to be, all right. Okay, so what happened? This was technically supposed to be underneath the headline box, but anytime you draw a box in InDesign, it automatically goes to the top of all the layers, okay? That doesn't mean you have to plan out every single box that you're gonna draw in advance to make sure that they're in the right order. You just have to change the ordering of the boxes when you're doing your layout. So right now I want this one underneath. The way you can do that is I'm gonna right click it, and there is an item here called arrange. So what arrange basically does is it arranges the boxes in the order that you want. I want to send it backwards. So slowly it's moving behind this headline box. I could have sent it all the way to the back if I wanted to, but then it would be behind this, light blue background that I have, and I don't want that. Then it would disappear. So you can, if you want, bring things back to the front or send things backwards. So that's how arrange works. And to do that, you just have to select an object and right click it, and that arrange option will show up for anything, okay? And then I'm just gonna put things here to the side and just continue making boxes on the screen for the different sections of my academic poster. And I've got that already done ahead of time. I don't wanna make this the box crazy show, but all I'm gonna do is copy this. All I did was create 2 boxes and put text here. And I'm gonna move it over to my academic poster. And I'm just doing copy paste, guys. All right, and all you have to do is arrange your layout exactly how you want it, okay? So like a cooking show, I'm gonna pretend like I already did this, okay? And we're out of the oven and we move on to the next step. So I've made some tweaks here, but you can see that basically it's almost the same layout. I've just kind of cleaned it up to make it look nicer. I did a really cool thing called a drop shadow to make something appear off the page. And to do that, you just right click it and go to effects, and you'll see really cool effects that are available, like drop shadow, outer glow, inner glow. Play around with it, but drop shadow is what causes that nice little shadow effect behind something to give it a little more depth. All right, I put my credentials. I'm very important in my institution. And I've got some stuff going on already just to kind of speed up the process of creating this document. All right. So there's a few things I want to go through now, which is like adding text like this lorem ipsum text that I added, and also images to your layout. So one really cool thing about InDesign is, so I've got in my objectives, these are my very important objectives: talk about chicken, make it explode, tell the masses. I would like to bullet this actually, so it's a little easier to read. But let's say I forgot how to put bullets in an InDesign document, which happens a lot. This is actually the thing I forget the most. So InDesign has this really cool help option at the top. So let's say I forgot how to do bullets. I'm just gonna type in the word bullets, okay? And what's really cool is that InDesign will tell me exactly where bullets are in the menu. So I know now it's in type and then bulleted and numbered list. So I'm just gonna go there and I'm gonna apply bullets. Boom, there they are right there. So the help function is really, really great if you forgot where a certain function was in InDesign and you just can't find it and you need help, the help function will point it out in the menu and also give you links to help topics on their own Adobe website so that you can figure out how to do something that you're having trouble with. All right, so that's how the help function works, and I highly recommend using it. Another thing I want to do is I want to add images now. So how do I do that? Very easy. Again, rectangle tool, our friend. I'm going to create a rectangle right here, and I want to put an image in this. So in order to put images into an InDesign document, you're going to make sure that with the black arrow, you have selected the object or the rectangle that you want to put the image in, and then you're going to go to File and Place, okay? File, Place. And then it's going to open up a window on your computer to find the file or the image that you want to input into that rectangle. I'm going to input this first one called chicken. All right. So I have a plate of chicken. It's kind of zoomed in very much, so it's hard to see in this little tiny window. But there's a few things I could do to resize an image in InDesign. One of those things is I've been using the black arrow, and that moves things around in InDesign. This white arrow, however, is called a direct selection tool. And the major difference between the black arrow and the white arrow is while the black arrow moves objects all over your layout, the white arrow moves things within a box, all right? So all this is doing, the white arrow is just moving the chicken around in the photo box, all right? And this is helpful because if I want to resize something, I can grab the end of the photo and just kind of move it in, all right, and kind of resize manually if I want to, all right? And if you're resizing images in InDesign, it's really important to hold down the Shift key so that you can keep the proportions, all right? Otherwise, if I just kind of like drag it this way, it kind of scrunches up my photo, and I don't want that. That looks weird. Let me undo that. So that's one way to resize your photos by using that white arrow, okay? Another way that you can resize images is by this really cool, very easy function by right-clicking an image, and then there is a menu item called fitting, and you can just fit all the content in a square or a rectangle very proportionately, and it resized it for me, okay, so that it fit in there. And from there I can tweak if I want to, but it's a way, if you've got a lot of images that you're resizing, to do it very fast. So that's how the two ways that you can basically resize images in your layout. I am going to just copy paste this. All right. And you can see those guidelines that InDesign's doing so I can line up these photos next to each other. And I want to put another image in there. So if I wanted to just delete this chicken, I would have to make sure the white arrow is selected and just hit delete. And then use the black arrow, make sure it's selected. File, place, again. And I'm going to put my second image, all right? And again, I think I need to resize these because they're a little, yeah, there we go. They're not quite taking up the full space. Perfect, all right? Again, I can add text right here. And I can manually type in the text like I was doing before. Or there's a really cool feature in InDesign where if you've already got a bunch of text that you've written up in, let's say, a Word document, you can actually import that in InDesign, which is what I'm going to do right now. So it works the same way. You're going to do File and Place. And now I'm going to look for that document. Here we go. It's just a lorem ipsum text again, dummy text, and boom, it's right there. I already wrote it. I don't have to write it again. It's right there. And if I wanted to, I could highlight it all and change, the font and things like that. One thing that's very important is if I select this box, you'll notice that this happens to have like a tiny red plus sign next to it. That indicates that the text is not quite fitting in this space that you've given it. If I were to stretch it out, you would see that that red plus sign is no longer there because all the text fits. So in that case, you've got a couple of options you could do. You could edit the text in here to delete what's running over, or you could even, this is more helpful when you're doing stuff like columns of text that run across a page. So I'm creating another box right here. And I've got this bad boy here. So I am going to click on that little red plus sign and just move the rest of the text down here. So again, this is more helpful for column text like in an article, but you know, that's one way that you can continue to move text across the page. And if I were to edit up here, it would edit here as well because they're connected. All right. So let me delete that right there. And then one really cool thing that one last thing I want to teach you is how things like InDesign and, for example, Illustrator work together. So I am going to make another box, and I'm going to input a graph that I designed in Illustrator, and it works the same way. We're going to do File and Place. All right, so I've got a pie chart. It's an AI file, meaning it came from Illustrator. Boom, it put it in there. Let me just resize it a bit so you guys can see it a little clearer. So I've got this, ooh, a little too big. I've got this pie chart here, right? And let's say, oh, I guess that's a nice pie chart, but what if I want to change the colors of it? And I just put it in InDesign. What do I do? Really easy. We're going to right click this object, and there is an option here called Edit Original. What that means is it's going to take me right into to Illustrator where I made this file, and I can make any changes in there that I want now. I'm going to ungroup this really quick just so you can see how it works. But let's say I wanted to change a color in this pie chart. Let's say I wanted this red piece to be, I don't know, let's do something that's very different looking. Let's make it blue. All right. And now I'm going to hit save. Okay. So what that should do is if I go back over to InDesign, it may take a few seconds, but it usually turns the color blue, and hopefully it works this time. But sometimes when you refresh, the color will change into your document. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but we'll see. But again, I can continue working on my document. I can put text here. I can type it in and just do things to make my document look really, really nice. Okay. I've got the final product here, but it looks mostly the same. I've just got, you know, basically this is just a bunch of boxes that I've put a lot of text and images into. All right. And really that's all it is. It's just kind of how you decide to lay out the document, what colors you use, maybe some cool effects that you decide to add, like these drop shadows that I showed you before. There's a lot of things you can do, and definitely you can explore the options in InDesign to see what you like. But one final thing is, so I've got this document that's all done and ready to go. I want to send it to the printer, and I ask them, what file type do you need? And they say, oh, you can send it to us in PDF. Okay, well, as you can see right now, it is an INDD file, which is an InDesign file type. If I wanted to save it and convert it to another file type, I would go here to File, all right, and definitely save as often as possible in InDesign. But when you're done, you can go to Export, all right, and right here, you can change it to a bunch of different types of file types. You've got an interactive PDF and a print PDF. These are probably the most commonly used formats to save an InDesign document to send it to other people. The only difference is interactive is useful only if you've put hyperlinks into your InDesign document. If you haven't, just use the regular print. But you can also see EPS, HTML, JPEG. There's a bunch of different options. So it really depends on what your needs are, and you can convert it into the document type that you want. And then you just hit save. All right. Bridget, do I have any questions about what I showed? I know I showed a lot, but.
Yeah, you have, okay, so you have a couple. One is from Barbara. She said, when you selected a font, I thought I saw that not all of the choices were TT true type. Is that a consideration in font selection?
Oh, so that's a good question. Let me go back to this one over here since I have more space. So one thing is that when you're selecting any type of font, TT or the OT, I think it's called, it doesn't matter so much as long as you're sure the other person on the other end has that same file type. So for example, if I'm going to send this to a printer, I need to make sure that the printer has all of these fonts if I'm going to send them the InDesign version of the file. Otherwise, things will come out kind of weird. The reason a lot of printers like PDF is because they don't have to worry about that. You've converted the document so they don't have to worry about fonts. But really the biggest deal about fonts is if you're planning to send the original InDesign file to somebody, you want to make sure that they have the same fonts as you. And if they don't, there is kind of a way to to like get around it. Actually, let me just do it with this. Oh, one thing I did not mention is you see all these guidelines and everything from designing it. If I want to get rid of those really quick just to see what everything looks like in a clean format, I can click this button at the very bottom of my toolbar and I can click preview and then it all goes away. So you kind of have a cleaner look of what everything looks like. But the guides are somewhat helpful if you're measuring things and moving them across the page. But anyway, so with this, let me put it back in a preview. So let's say somebody didn't have this font for some reason, Barbara. There is an option called Create Outlines. It's under Type, Create Outlines. And what that does is it converts all of the font into basically artwork. It basically turns everything into artwork so that they don't need the font type on the other end. They can just, their computer will just read it as a piece of art or a photo, essentially, that they can make larger if they need to and things like that. The only thing that happens once you do create outlines is that you can no longer edit the text. So you have to make really, really sure that you are not going to edit this anymore. If that makes sense, Barbara, I hope that helps.
Yes, she said yes.
Okay, perfect.
A couple more questions.
Yeah.
Are the results different using save as versus export?
Oh, so I can show you actually what that is. So if you do save as, it only lets you save as different InDesign file types. So they are different. Export lets you save it as file formats aside from InDesign.
And then this is a good one. How do you make sure that image resolution is good enough for printing?
Oh, so that is a very good question. There are lots of ways to do that. It kind of depends on a lot of things. First, I would recommend you speak to the printer if you're planning on having it professionally printed and just say, hey, what resolution do you need things for this to come out well? Okay. And they'll tell you. And then on your end, you kind of have to find, if you're using images, they have to be very high res. It usually I use things that sometimes are at least 300, I would say, at least 300 DPI is a very, pretty clean file type. If you're using very big images, a lot of times using vector helps because then you don't have to worry about resolution. It's just anything that you can expand and contract and it will not affect the resolution at all. So a lot of times I recommend if you have artwork that you're using to just do vector. And there are lots of places that you can get those. There are a lot of stock image sites that you can pull images from, or if you're using photos and you're taking the photos, make sure you're using a very, very good camera so that you can get those high res images. But yeah, there's a ton of different things you could do, but definitely speak to your printer ahead of time and ask what resolution he needs to make it look nice when you print it.
Cool. And then one more, is there a specific template that needs to be used when sending out email notifications for department seminars or events?
Oh, that's a very good question. And while I answer it, I'm actually going to launch a poll about today's session. So if you guys don't mind, just telling us how the session went, it is anonymous. We use this information to kind of improve our session. So I would really appreciate if you'd answer it. But again, that's a very good question. So if you're sending things via email, honestly, the best format is usually HTML. A lot of people send JPEGs, and that is kind of fine when you're sending it in the body of an email. The problem comes down to accessibility. So a lot of times people will input just an image with a bunch of text and stuff in it. And if somebody has no visibility or low visibility, they can't read it at all with any of the programs on their computer. So it ends up being useless to people with disabilities, which, we don't want to do. We don't want to exclude anyone. And also, if you're using just a JPEG, if you've got hyperlinks, nobody can click on them. So if you're going to use a JPEG, please have some text that also kind of repeats what you've got in the image. HTML is also another very good format to have because a lot of times you don't have to worry about those problems with JPEGs. You can still read the text and, click on things. The biggest issue with HTML, at least in Outlook, is that sometimes it kind of messes with your formatting. I have I have noticed that if I use the webmail version of Outlook, so that's the o365.wild.cornell.edu, I don't run into as many formatting issues. If I use my Outlook for Mac, I run into a ton of issues. So usually if I've got a very nice email that is formatted in HTML, I'm going to go with webmail. And I always test it before I send it out, just to make sure that there's no major issues with it. Again, a couple things you can do, JPEG or HTML, but definitely, if you're going to use JPEG, try to have some text in there above or below your image, just so people can click on things and, people with visibility issues can read it. And if you're going to use HTML, definitely test it a bunch and try it in webmail first before you do it anywhere else.
Cool. A few other quick questions. Will there be additional sessions in the near future from Elizabeth?
So I don't have any planned right now, but if you have InDesign questions, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna send this recording to everybody. Also, I'm gonna include a bunch of links. I'm gonna include like a simpler version of this tutorial where you can kind of follow along with it. It's really great. It's how to do a flyer. But it goes through all the same things, and it kind of adds a few other tools that you could play around with. And if you have any questions after looking at that, you can just send me an email, honestly, and I can try to help you with any questions that you might have about InDesign. I try to do these like every couple of months, but we also have a ton of other, ITS supported applications, and we want to make sure that at least for Tech Tuesday's sake, those are getting attention too. So this won't be as frequent, but I'm available for questions if that helps you.
Excellent. A couple more. When you import an image to InDesign, does the image resolution change?
No, it should not. So what you see is what you get with InDesign. So if you've got an image with a very, 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 very small resolution, that's how it's going to look like on your page. It's going to show up very, very tiny. And if you've got something that's a big photo with a massive resolution, then that's what it's going to look like on your page too. And then you're just going to resize it as needed. So I would say with InDesign, the better the resolution, the better your document's going to look. Again, try to go for that 300 DPI because that usually is what looks the best. If it happens to be even higher, I mean, awesome. But really, again, if you're going to get it printed, just talk to the printer to see what their minimum is to make something look really nice.
Nice. And then one more, Danny, you might have to retype your question. When PDF doesn't usually the hyperlink remain active. So I think you're asking when you PDF a doc, does the hyperlink remain active?
Oh, so again, let me go back into InDesign. So if I was going, well, let's say I had a hyperlink somewhere in here. You have to export it as PDF interactive. So there's two options for PDF. You need to save it as PDF interactive if there are hyperlinks that you actually want people to click on in the document. Like let's say you have an electronic brochure for your website and there are hyperlinks on it and you're just posting it on there, but you're not planning to print it, okay? That would be the ideal use for something like PDF interactive and not PDF print. Print will get rid of any hyperlinks that you have in your document.
Awesome. I think that's it for the questions that we had so far.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. I realize this is kind of a lot for like a beginner's course. There's a lot of information being thrown at you, but I really appreciate you guys taking the time to try to learn the tool. I really love it. I think it makes publications look great. And also, if you don't want to kind of build anything from scratch, because it can be a little intimidating, I will admit, we have our brand center, brand.wild.cornell.edu. Let me move this up so you can see it a little better. But basically, this is where you can find a bunch of templates here. So things like academic posters, like I just did right now. You have to log in with your seaweed and password. But what's really cool is that you can download the InDesign versions, like it's in the zip file of the layout that's listed on the left-hand side. And you don't have to work from scratch. You could just kind of work with these layouts. You can customize them as much as you want, you know, with your images and things like that, graphs, diagrams, anything. And this is kind of nice because if you're nervous about using InDesign for the first time or don't know where to start, this kind of gives you a place to start. And you can just play around with these templates for academic posters. Or I know the flyers has some InDesign options, brochures has InDesign options. So maybe try downloading some of these in the Brand Center and play around with them and get used to using InDesign. Anything else that I might have missed? I think we got them all right, Bridget.
Yeah, that's all I see. Just a bunch
Okay.
of reviews now.
All right. I see a lot of thank yous. No, thank you guys. And thank you to Bridget as always, because she's always a great co-host and helping to answer questions. So if you guys give me a little bit of time, I might have it ready tomorrow, but I just have to format the video so I can make sure it gets to you in a hyperlink. And, you know, have fun using InDesign and have a great rest of the day.